Okay, we are live. Welcome to the show. This is season 2, episode 5 of BenThere. Crazy to think this is actually the 35th episode overall. Today is going to be fun. I know you're all used to, those of you that are watching this or listening to this are used to hearing me say that. But this is going to be fun. I got a guy on here that he and I have so much in common, and yet our lives are completely different. We live on different parts of the world. He's in the future, so to speak, right now. So we'll check in on the future and see how things are going. But Mr. Warren Parker, how are you, brother?
I'm great, Big Ben. How you doing?
Good. I haven't heard Big Ben in a long time, so it's good to hear that. So thanks for joining me, man. It's been a minute. You know, you and I were at TAS together for only a year, back in the middle school days. Yeah, but it's good to hear from you. Good to talk to you. Good to see you. And I can't wait to get into this. But you kind of know the drill. I know you've watched a lot of these episodes, and I just want to start off by allowing you to introduce yourself and just kind of talk about your background, your upbringing, your family, all that stuff. If you take the time now, go ahead, man. It's all you.
Yeah, no problem. So just before we get into that, you'll comment about checking in with the future. That's always been a joke of mine with the American friends of mine that you guys live in the past. Come on, catch up. So, but no, so I'll go into that a little bit later with the whole Y2K thing. But so my name is Warren, as Ben said, and I was born in South Africa. Only spent a couple of years there before being hoisted up and carted off to a little island off the coast of China called Taiwan. And would never have known what it was apart from all the little stickers of everything being made in Taiwan. But we ended up there, which was supposed to be a three-year contract for Dad's job over there, and that turned into 8 years. So I had about 3 years of my life in South Africa, Port Elizabeth, and a year in Joburg. Then Taiwan was where we ended up, and some amazing memories from that place, and a lot of formative stuff that really started to sort of show through later that I wasn't aware of. But foundations for who I am today really stem back from that period in that spot. After Taiwan, Dad got transferred down to Australia, so out of the foreign cultures and back into Western civilization. So spent the next 6 years living in Geelong before moving into Melbourne, which has more or less been my base for every year since. And I say base because it's one of the things that's common with all of us talking about this third culture stuff is home is a very loose concept that sticks there. So Melbourne's been a strong base and feels at times like home, and sort of feels at times like I want to sort of travel because I'm addicted to that. So
Yeah.
so that's it. Basically, did my high school here. Started studying with a science degree. Learned a few things in there that were sort of valuable bits of knowledge that I'd take with me through the line. But more or less a varied background as like a few of the guys on here. So I started off in the hospitality industry, working at the casino down here. So I was a dealer, just sort of working down at Crown in Melbourne, and then also a few jobs with restaurants and bartender jobs along the way before branching out and trying my hand to try and find my space and my spot in this world. So all the while through, I've had a bit of a taste, a lot of attempts at home-based business on the side, and learned a lot, lots of personal development through that, and everything's sort of been a big learning curve all the way through. Eventually found myself sort of getting into finance. I've got a bit of mortgage banking background like you're into at the moment.
Yeah.
Move from there into property with real estate on the buyer's advocacy side of things, and then started to forge my own path and go down the self-employed route. Eventually got into the space of owning a few fitness studios with a Pilates franchise down here in Australia,
Oh, cool.
and
Yeah.
most recently got out of that and moved into where I'm at now, which is really kicking the entrepreneurial fire that's sort of built up over the years. So that's it. But
I love it. I
that's my
can't wait to
story.
talk about this just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah. Go ahead.
me either. No, go for it.
Yeah, no,
No,
I want to. We're
yeah,
definitely going to get into the entrepreneurial thing because
yep,
I love hearing stories like that. But
yep,
you briefly mentioned it, but I want to always pick the guest brain right away. The concept
hmm
of home. You know, people that
yep,
grew up like we did. You know, it's a tricky thing. You know,
mm,
like you spent a lot of time as a youngster in Asia, and then I ended up going
yep,
back and moved a lot. You know, But let's talk about the concept of home, because
Yep.
obviously you just said you're born in South Africa, but
Yep.
you are technically Australian, yet you grew up in Asia, and
Yep.
yet you had an American accent by the time you went back to Australia,
Yep.
right? As we
That's it.
talked about. So what is your opinion? Let's talk about it. It's always the hardest question, and that's why I'm always the one to start it off. But what is the concept of home to you? I mean, we're the same age, and so I'd love to
Yeah.
hear your expertise on this. But what's your concept of home?
My concept, because I mean, like literally, like we've grown up, we've sort of used to sort of like we're in a place temporarily. Like you might be there
Yeah.
for six years. I think the longest I've lived in a place is 10 years, which is
Okay.
and the closest second to that would be about five. So I'm in well and truly in double digits for the number of houses I lived in up to the age of 45. So
Yeah.
looking at that, I sort of think home to me, it's more so a state of mind than a place or an actual physical location. I think going through working, living different places and being back here. Well, like furthermore to the story, while I was living in Australia, mum and dad got transferred and continued working back throughout Asia. So I kind of
Oh, really?
got used to the whole point of like being in Taiwan with all the
Yeah.
family, the immediate family around, and then from that point back to Australia where we lived as a family for the 6 to 8 years, and then mum and dad moved off to travel around sort of India, Thailand, Taiwan again that they went through.
Okay.
So I got a few chances to travel. And again, going back, I got the chance to go back to Taiwan in the year 2000. And again, it
A little
just
different,
felt
right?
so very
Yeah.
different, but still so familiar
Yeah.
and so comfortable. Again, like it felt like home, but it
Yeah.
wasn't because I was there for holiday, but it still felt so. I kind of think home is a just a state of being, state of mind. It's not really a physical location. And going through, so like a lot of us that we've been having these conversations with you on here. I met my wife late and married late in life, and I think part of the late factor is trying to find someone that's got that sort of comfort with on
Yeah.
that level because like as I said, the home factor is a state of mind and sort of a physical thing. It's not about where you're going to live and all that. It's about who you're going to be in all these places with and live with and all that. And so it took a long time to find her, but when I met her, it's like literally it was that she felt like home. So as soon as
Yeah.
I met her, she felt like home, and that's it. So it's kind of I look at it. It's home is basically just a state of mind and just the general feeling you get when you're either in a certain location or who you're with in that location. That's what makes it home. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
say
Totally.
I'm a citizen of anywhere except
Yeah.
the whole world basically, and I'm itching to get back traveling again with this COVID stuff. So
Yeah. We're
yeah,
global nomads, right? And that's kind of
that's
how I
it.
term it for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
But
love it.
yeah, I mean, I've said this over and over and over on the show. I'm American, passport,
Mm-hmm.
proud of it, all that stuff.
Yep.
Lived here a while now, on and off, but there's something about Asia that's still, like you just said. I went
Mm,
back to Taipei. I hadn't been to Taipei in 17 years,
mm-hmm.
but went back when I was living in Shanghai. I went back and was able to meet up with Tim Wanger, which who you
Yep.
know, and we
I
were able
know
to
him
take a
well.
trip. Yeah, we took a trip
Yeah.
to Taipei in 2000. I want to say 16. That sounds about right. And I hadn't
Yep.
been back in 17 years. And you're right. The second we landed, it was like, this is home, but it's not, but it
Yeah.
is. But,
Yeah.
it had changed
Yep.
so much, and yet parts of it hadn't changed at all.
Yep.
And that,
And
and I also want to agree with you. I got married late in life. I've only been married a few years. I've been with my
mm-hmm.
wife for 4 or 5 years, but it's the same thing. She didn't grow up
Mm,
like we did,
no.
yet she did have an opportunity to travel a lot as a kid because her mom worked for one of the airlines, and so she got to see the globe. And I think you're exactly right. It's when
Yeah.
you meet somebody like that who sees you for who you are, and
Mm,
warts and all, and understand, doesn't really understand your background, but is willing to accept it and try to understand it. That's a
yep.
big part of who we are, right? And
Oh
it's
yeah.
great. I mean, she and I went to Italy for a honeymoon, and we've traveled all over the place since. And it's COVID's obviously stopped that, but you're right.
Mm-hmm.
It's she's home to me now. That's
Yeah.
home. Wherever she is where I'm at. So it's
Yep.
I totally agree with you. It's funny that, yeah, you and I both are in
Yeah.
the same boat there. So
Yep. No,
no, that's awesome, man.
that's it.
Thanks
And
thanks
then
for sharing that. Let's let's transition then. The pros and cons. I mean, you grew up internationally, especially you're Australian. Your parents are Australian then, right? Not South African.
My parents are actually British, so there's
Oh,
another
even
complication of
more of a
the extra
twist.
level of
Yeah.
madness. Yep,
Okay, yeah, add one more twist to it, right? Yeah.
yep,
So, but that throws this even more so. But let's talk about the fact that you did grow up globally.
mhm,
You born in South Africa. You're technically, I guess, Australian, but your parents are British, and here we go again, right? But
yep,
there are pros and cons to growing up the way we did. I mean, everybody, I don't know about you, but when I first got back to the States and started talking about my upbringing, I didn't openly admit it or talk about
mhm,
it. People would ask
yep,
and I'd answer. I'd always get that's really cool, or I'd get the other extreme of, oh yeah, cool, whatever, no big deal.
yep,
And that's fine, no big deal. It just was what it was. But let's talk about the pros and cons, because there are both of those things to growing up the way we did. In your opinion,
yeah.
let's talk pros and cons.
Yeah, okay. So I think in a lot of aspects, everything that we sort of experienced was itself a pro and a con, and that there's a lot of things that sort of fit both if you look at it. So you look at the fact that we'd be there, like you're either there for 2 years or 4 years or years, however long you're there, and your best friend is there for 6 months, and then all of a sudden he's gone, and then you got another new group of people that arrive. You got to make friends or assimilate quickly. So you get a new best friend and lots of stuff. So you start to get that sort of I don't know, just the inbuilt resilience. It's sort of like it's not really resilience. It's kind of a case of well, it's not going to last forever. I'll just enjoy it now, kind of thing. So you get that sort of detachment from basically the strength. I mean, kids today are lucky with all the social media and the Facebook and
Right.
all that. They can keep relationships going for years. Where I hated writing, so letters were never going to be an option. So that was it. There was no chance of keeping in touch with a lot of people, and phone numbers kept changing so rapidly, so you lose
Yeah.
contact very quick. But that sense of resilience that sort of kicks in, you kind of get immune to people coming in and out of your life so easily. So you do have a tendency, like the pro is you become resilient, nothing's going to impact you as much. The con of that is that it's kind of makes you a little bit emotionally detached from situations. So you kind of you get so resilient to certain things from that perspective, but on the flip side, you kind of also hold back from fully engaging because you kind of want to keep a little bit of something for yourself all the way through because in 6 months it could be gone, a year could be gone. So there's elements of that sort of kick in all the way through, and they sort of translate into different areas of life. And until you sort of become aware of that foundation sort of being there, can be quite restrictive or that if you let it be. So
Mm,
come along the lines of if you open up and sort of throw yourself in, yeah, you get a hell of a time. If you haven't got an emotional disconnect, you get sort of hurt by it a bit more. But if you have that emotional disconnect, it doesn't hurt you. You just move on to the next thing. And sometimes that can make you look like an insensitive person on the side. And
yeah.
I've had moments where I've sort of had comments or conversations with the wife or other friends over the past, and I seem insensitive, but it's not. It's the upbringing I've had that sort of
Yeah.
takes that emotional factor out of the equation. So I'm not aware that that's lacking. So
Yeah.
it comes across as insensitive to people that sort of haven't experienced or sort of gone out the way we have to a degree or had that level of sort of engagement, disengagement that we had to grow up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I experienced the same thing, and I always joke, well, not joke, but I always talk about the fact that it's not about better or worse. It's not like
No.
I'm walking around like, look at me, look at me. In fact, it was just the opposite when I got back to the States.
Mm,
But we'll get into acclimation in just a minute.
yeah.
But
Hmm.
it's just our story, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's just happened to be the cards we were dealt, and here's how we were supposed to understand
Yeah.
it and get through it, and not even know that we were in it, right?
Mm.
At the
But
time, I learned more
we
about it later, like you did,
we
but
didn't know any different.
no,
That's
I
what
thought
we knew.
everybody did that. Yeah, I
Mm.
thought everybody like that's what they did, and then they come back to the States in the summertime. I left.
Yep.
So you were even younger than me, maybe. How old were you when you first moved to Taipei?
I like if I was so I born in 75, I was there in 79, so four
Oh
and a
wow.
half around. So
Yeah, you were.
I
I
was
moved to because we were in Hong Kong first. My family went to Hong
yep,
Kong first, and I was 6.5, 7. My brother was 8. So I mean, that's pretty young anyway. But 4.5. I mean, that's when you're starting. Things are starting to click. You're starting to get a concept of who you are in the world around
hmm
you. And like you, I thought
yeah,
that was just a normal thing. I thought everybody
yep.
did that. It wasn't until years later that years later I realized that no, this isn't normal. So, but to us it is, right? So,
Yep, no, that's it.
yeah, no, that's awesome, man. Well, let's talk international school because I'm assuming you only went to Taipei American School as your international school experience, right?
Yeah, no, that was it. So the like when I came to Australia, that was all literally 95% Australian. So
Yeah.
not very much not international. There was a few there, but Taipei American School TAS was my stomping ground for a good 6 years. So and
Good
I mean
memories.
good memories. Like it's literally I look back and think about it, and there's nothing but good memories in that place. And I mean when you look at everything we got exposed to, like you drive down the street, like all the different foods we got to try, different
Yeah,
places.
yeah,
Taiwan was an amazing island, like to go hiking and exploring on. I still love it. My wife is hounding me to take her back with our two kids so they can see where Daddy grew up. So
that's awesome.
that's next on the bucket list once we're able to start traveling. But there's just nothing but good memories. It's and even still reconnecting with people over Facebook or Instagram. It's literally I may not have known people really well back then or for a long period of time, but you just got that instant rapport and that you
Yeah.
just pick up where you left off even 30 years later. Funny story on that one, not so much a funny story, but I was in America. I think it was about 2000, to, to to the early 2000s. Trying to remember the year exactly, but I just connected with an old TAS buddy, Chris Nepis, on he was a year below us at TAS, but
Yeah, the name
just
sounds
connected with him
familiar.
on, yeah, so he was at Hong Kong as well for a bit, so
Yeah.
but he was there after TAS. But I connected with him and I said, look, I'm going to be in town. You up to catching up? So without sort of anything, I was just hopped on a train there from LA to San Diego. Well, it was supposed to be just a few hours catch up and all that sort of stuff. I ended up staying with him for a week and a half before moving on to Texas, where my sister was living with her husband. So that was literally out of nowhere, and it just basically like friendship just finishes
Hmm.
there, transport 25 years later, and picks up just where it left off with no discomfort, no nothing. Just like time hasn't passed
Right.
at all. It's
Yeah.
bizarre. It's a a great great thing when you can just sort of pick up with people that you grew up like that.
Oh yeah. I'm smiling because I agree totally, man. It's
Mm,
the people that I've like Facebook is an interesting concept for so many reasons,
mm,
and we don't have to get political or whatever, but
no.
there's people like us. It's been absolutely fantastic to reconnect. And you're right, you
Yeah.
pick up right where
Yep.
you left off. It's like no time has
Yep.
passed at all.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. And that's a lot of people probably live that way. That's fine, but especially
Hmm.
people that are like us that have said goodbye so many times at such a young age
Yeah.
to people that you think you're never going to hear from again. Yeah, you
Yep.
reconnect right away, and
Yep.
it's
And it's
totally right. You pick up right where you left off. It's like no time has
mm,
passed at all. Even though look at you and I, 30 years,
yeah.
like 30 plus years
Yeah. And
probably.
it's definitely so 86 would have been the last time.
Yeah,
So
that was the year we
yeah,
moved to
so
Taipei.
that's
Yeah,
yeah.
so
So that's
it's
30.
been a minute. Yeah, no, but I
Yeah,
love that. But let's
it's been a big minute.
yeah, right. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Acclimation process then. So now that the people that are watching, obviously a lot of people that watch this totally understand what you and I are talking about because a lot of them are
Hmm.
TCKs, third culture kids,
Yep. Mm.
which I didn't even know about till probably 15 years ago. I didn't even know we
Yep.
had a term. We'd had a title, and that was the beginning of, to me, that was the beginning of finally something starting to make sense, right?
Yep. Hmm.
Um, and still, even just doing these shows, I mention it all the time when I talk to people that grew up the way we did. It's therapeutic for me. That's why I do this. Really,
Yeah.
they're fun to do. It's
Yep.
great to reconnect, but maybe I'm a little selfish because it's been great therapy for me. It's free therapy, so to speak. So, but
It's something to do during COVID as well with
yeah, totally.
all of that
Well, that's how
crazy
this.
manic.
You and I talked earlier. That's how
Yep.
this started. It was just something to do.
Yep.
I got interviewed this time last year, and I just thought, what the hell? Why not? Let's just do it. Reconnect with some people at the very most. I thought we'd
Yep.
do about 10 of these, and we're on number 35. So,
And
um,
it's oddly enough, it's probably about 35 years since we would have
it's
been in
right.
touch together. So
That's
it's
right.
not far
Yeah,
off
totally.
being yeah.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I do when I think about the way I grew up and the way you grew up, the one thing that still is a struggle for me, even now, is
Hmm.
the acclimation process back here stateside because I'm supposed to look the part, act the part, I'll understand the part, and there's
Yeah,
days that I do, and then there's definitely days that I don't.
yeah.
I'm sure you can relate to that, but what was your experience then once you left Taipei? What was your acclimation process like going back to Australia?
Well, I'd like to say it was a 100% smooth transition, but it was far from that. I spent a good chunk of time wanting to be back in Taiwan and sort of hating having left there because I enjoyed the experiences there so much. And when we got we moved to a satellite city of Melbourne, which is a smaller city, large town, small city called Geelong, and not definitely not too many floating around there that grew up with the experience we had. So even oddly enough, there was a guy that was at TAS for a couple of years. His dad worked at Ford as well. He was actually in Geelong, but um, basically we're sort of in the same friendship group and all that. But in that sort of sense, like Taiwan just had this whole other element that sort of made friendship sort of surpass all levels. Where you just everyone pretty much was good friends with everyone because
Uh,
we were all in the same boat together. And so we moved down to Geelong. Had a couple of like the one friend who was from TAS, but like different interests, and obviously in the Western schools, your interests sort of pull you to where you go. So we reconnected and all that through music as well. So obviously was involved in music in Taiwan, but music became my sort of saving grace in Geelong because it was sort of the one sort of piece I could bring that sort of gave me a sense of calmness, and then. The other factor for me was coming from TAS, which is a really high level school. I got put up a couple of years. So I was in large town with an American accent. I was smaller than everybody because I was a year and a half to 2 years younger than some people. So I was literally like a wounded zebra on the Serengeti, waiting for the lions to come at me. So it was I didn't have too much experience of people not sort of expand or didn't have too many negative impacts, but there was a lot of stuff that sort of I didn't feel in my place for a long time there, and probably carried all the way through school until I got to uni and started to find my own 2 feet and find myself. I don't think I really settled coming from Taiwan to Australia, quite as uh, quite as much as I probably would have liked to when I look back in hindsight. But at the same time, I wouldn't change that 6 years in Taiwan for anything because going past that sort of 6 years of school, and it was a really good school. There's a lot of great people there, but I felt more at home in Taiwan, probably because it
yeah,
was such a long period there, and because you're so used to people coming in and out, in and out. If you don't get along with someone, they might not be there in 6 months. Whereas if you don't get along with someone, you're there for 6 months, 6 months to 6 years. You've got
uh,
to find a way. So that resilience factor, that's another side. And that's the flip side to that. You don't have that resilience on that other side, where it's a good thing in some instances, but on this side, you kind of don't have that resilience, the sort of stuff that's getting a bit tough and a bit hard to deal with. So you can't procrastinate it. You've got to find ways to deal with it, but you don't have that sort of consistency in your formative years. And you get to this point, and it becomes a little tough to manage and deal with. So you kind of sort of end up in a state of limbo while you're trying to get through that, and before you know it, off to university days.
yeah. No,
So
I totally agree. I want to
yeah,
argue. I want to say no, that's not the case, but no, I'm fully on
yeah,
board, man. That's the
hmm
same. But even though you went to Australia and I came back to the States, I mean that's the same exact.
yeah,
Because I came back, I graduated TAS, and then I
yeah,
came back to the States, and I was so pumped to come back and quote unquote be American, and then as
hmm
soon as I got here, I felt so out of place,
mm.
you know. And
That's
I ended up going back to Shanghai as an adult, and I had it happen again. 2 years later, I was only in Shanghai for a couple of years, but when I came back to the
hmm
States, I'd gotten so used to that lifestyle again and understanding
yeah.
that felt like home, even though it wasn't Taipei, but it was Asia.
Mm.
So I understood it. The chaos and the craziness and the
hmm
everything that you're not supposed to understand actually felt normal to me, right? So,
Yeah.
but coming back to the States the second time, I've struggled with it again. Here I am,
hmm
4 years, almost 3.5 years back in the States, and I'm still going like scratching my head, going, "Wait a minute, this some things still don't make sense," right? So,
Uh, that happens
yeah,
every time I go on a holiday. I come back and it's
yeah,
like, oh, that's like nowhere near the same magnitude, but it's
yeah,
there. You get off the plane, you come back, it's like, hang on, no, I wasn't done with that. It's like
yeah,
I gotta go back and all that. But it's not that I wasn't done with that. Like I was ready for the holiday. It's like it's the immersion factor that you're
Yeah,
there and you're totally enveloped in what you grew up with and what you're familiar with, and you're
yeah,
again coming back to your formative years. It's sort of so ingrained that when you're in it, it's so comfortable that you don't want to come back from it.
yeah, totally. And I
Yeah.
think like you too, I don't know how much, I'm obviously COVID's affected the whole world, but I haven't been on a plane in
Hmm.
almost a year. And that's a shock. When I do the
Yeah.
math, I think I've been on an airplane. That's the longest I've ever gone in my life. And I've had a passport since I was 4 years old, right? So
Hmm.
it's I don't know if
Yep.
you're that way too, but it's just crazy for us.
That's I'm literally dying to get on a plane and go see somewhere, even to lie on a new beach somewhere for a week and do nothing. But as
Yeah,
long as I can get somewhere that it's basically completely like foreign environment where I'm
yeah,
at. But I mean, my last trip was actually to thinking back was to Vegas. I had a conference there, and then I had a couple of meetings teed up where I was in ended up in Salt Lake City for a bit. I think that I
yeah.
actually messaged you when I was there,
That's right.
seeing if you
Yeah.
wanted to catch up for a dinner or a beer or something. And you happened to be out of town that time, but that was
Yeah.
the last time I was on a plane was when I was in Salt Lake City that time. So that
Well, the
was
next time you come through,
2019.
man, like we said off air, we'll have a beer or two or 10, whatever
Yep,
works. Yeah.
that's it.
So,
That's it.
yeah, because not a lot of people come through Salt Lake, so that's good
No,
to hear. When you're here, man, let's do it. So,
yeah, no, it's actually it's
um,
bizarre. It's bizarre out of all the cities that you live in,
yeah, yeah,
all the cities I could have found a sort of a connection in America through. It happened to be Salt Lake City, so
yeah.
it's bizarre how that's panned out. So yeah,
No,
especially I've
it's
got family brother-in-law living in Texas, so that
okay.
doesn't gel with Salt Lake. It's a completely different flight path as well. So
Absolutely. Well, yeah,
mm,
you know I'm here. You know where to find me. You've got my
yep,
number and
yep,
everything, so it's all
that's it.
good. I want to respectfully ask this question, and if you're comfortable
Yep,
talking about it. Prior to going live, I didn't know this, and you and I kind
yep,
of talked about your sister offline.
yep. Hmm.
Uh, I did not know that she passed, man, and my condolences for you. But you brought up
Yep.
something that made me really think, even just in I guess it's been about 30 minutes since you and I had that conversation, and I
Yep.
truly mean this respectfully. So,
Yep.
I got your blessing to talk about this too, just so those of
Hmm.
you that are watching.
Yep.
Um, you talked about the fact that those of us that have grown up overseas, we kind of get that emotional instinct. It's part of our
Yep.
DNA. We learn to kind
Yep.
of adapt quicker. Grief and death and all that is hard no matter where you're at, if
Mm.
who you are, things like that. If you don't mind, talk about your sister and talk about that experience and the concept and the connection of being a TCK and the emotional side of it. That we talked about this too, and just that growing up fast and learning to maneuver through those emotional times maybe helped you through
Mm.
that process, maybe helped you through grief. But if you don't
Um.
mind, I want to give the reason I'm bringing this up. First off, I want to give some, you know, just allow people to understand your sister and let you to
Hmm.
talk about it for a minute. But if you don't mind talking about that whole process and the TCK-ness and the emotional concept and what we went through as a younger kids, maybe helped you through that. I don't know, but go ahead and talk about that, man.
Yeah. No, I'd say there's elements that helped and there's elements that made it more difficult, and I'll come back to that in a second. But with my sister, obviously, she was a TCK as well. She was a TAS girl, about three years behind me. So there's a few people connected on Facebook that I've seen watching your chats that would know her, Amanda Parker. So she sort of continued the expat journey where she met her husband of all places in an airport bar in LAX.
That
In
sounds about
transit,
right.
she was off to visit mom and dad living in
Yeah.
Detroit. She met her husband in LAX after there was a flight delay of 5 hours, and then ended up sort of getting married to him a few later. So I've got two amazing nephews that were born from them, and dying to get on a plane to go and see them and take my two kids to go and see them again as well. But obviously that's off the agenda for a little while until things get under control. But no, it was coming on about. I'll go blank with it. I think it's about six years ago now. That I got a phone call one night, and she had just had an ambulance called for her, and then 45 minutes later, I got a phone call saying that I was expecting better news than I got, but 45 minutes later, got a phone call saying that she passed away. And there's go back. You go into that straight. Obviously, you go into that numb state of mind. But there's elements of when you grow over to TCK, where you've got that people come in and out of your life so much that you become immune to the negative emotion of it because it doesn't really serve any purpose at that point. So when it comes to the negative emotions, like I was saying, there's goods and bad sides to it. So you kind of get a little bit numb from it, and probably extremely numb in certain aspects. But there's also like a immunity, like not so much that, but a disconnect to the really negative emotion because you sort of grown up with that negative emotion doesn't matter because something else will come in to replace it very soon. And so that becomes a thing. You start to actually feel a little bit of guilt for not having that deeper level of emotion. And then you sort of come back and then it comes back in a big wave and you sort of can't cope with the big wave that's coming at you. And at the same time, you're able to get through and plod through because you've been sort of got that inbuilt resilience that allows you just to function. Like I was talking to you before we got online. This happened a month before I was supposed to be getting married to my wife. We were going to be flying to Hawaii. I was about to go and see my sister for the first time in a year in Hawaii, where she was going to be a bridesmaid at the wedding, and my little nephew was going to be a ring bearer, and all that sort of stuff. So we had all this planned out, and this basically just shook the whole world. We still went on a honeymoon, but I was in a very up and down, all over the place, like not so much externally, but internally, and there's an element of I think one of the other conversations we had before we came on is like I'm not sure if it was we were talking before we came on or when we started, but there's an element of where you can kind of look like you're sort of like emotionally inept or whatever but it's our conditioning as kids that we sort of like build that up as a resilience tool. And you kind of look through, and I'm going through that few weeks on the honeymoon with my wife. That basically there were moments where I probably would have looked like a complete emotionless asshole, for lack of a better word. And it literally times it sort of like fast forward a bit, and you look back and you think, okay, the reason I was able to cope and survive it was because of that upbringing I had, where survival was like instability was stability. That was literally the simplest way I can describe it. The more unstable life was, the more stable we felt at that
Yep.
in that go, because that was what was normal for us growing up in that environment. So this was the absolute polar extreme of instability, like losing a sibling. I mean, it's hard enough losing a parent. But to lose someone you're supposed to be growing up with and spending years and years catching up with, that was a hard thing to accept, hard thing to adjust with, and it was very difficult. But also, I think it started to like, help my wife understand a bit about my upbringing and who I sort of become and what sort of helped form that coming through was because she started to sort of see the impacts of my childhood upbringing in Taiwan sort of coming through. So that was one of the big things is the pros and the cons of both things. It's like it's everything. It's on the one side, it's going to have the ultimate pro, the best life lesson learned. On the other
Yep.
extreme, there's going to be moments where it's the complete opposite. It's the worst possible thing that could be happened or installed here. So it kind of becomes. I think someone went on a holiday in India once, and someone asked me to describe it, and I said, just think of it as a bipolar for every sense of of your of your body. Like you'll see the most amazing, beautiful things you've seen in your life. You go around the corner and see the most hideous and horrendous thing you've seen in your life, but nothing in the middle. You pull to extremes on everything, and I think that's the TCK upbringing kind of does that in some of the sort of skills and morals and virtues that we learn. So there's no middle ground, which is where most people sit. We can't exist there. We never will. We can kind of understand it, but we
Yep.
exist on the extremes of both sides of that scale, and we can flip back and forth between both sides without actually finding that middle point because we weren't sort of made for that middle point. We weren't brought up to
I
understand what
love
it
that.
was.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great way to sum it up. And I love that the instability was stability. I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard that before, but it
Yep.
sums up perfectly how we grew up. So
Yep. I mean, that's
yeah,
like, and I think that's the other thing, like stability that has that. If something's stable, you kind of, because of the way we grew up, you had everything sort of, okay, if it's been like this for 5 years, something's got to change. You kind of got that underlying inbuilt thing where stability is actually means there's a change coming because and you kind of look at that, and that, again, that can be a really positive thing or a really negative thing, depending on the state of mind you're in at the time when you're thinking about it. But it's just that
yeah,
like stability, because we're so used to instability, you sort of like come back to that point of stability just doesn't always feel comfortable as instability does. So
yeah.
it's a bizarre, and I'm not saying it's like go out there and make friends with a bunch of absolute nut job muppets, but you actually it's a case of like comfort, comfort and discomfort. They kind of
Mhm.
have moments where they're the polar opposites of what they actually are normally defined as. So what's uncomfortable is actually comfortable. What's comfortable is
Comfortable.
actually uncomfortable. So you get that element that sort of kicks in every now and then, which just complicates the life even more. But it's
Oh,
it
absolutely.
is what it is.
Uh,
It's how we grew
It
up.
is totally, and I agree with you. Yeah. Well, look,
Yep.
man, thank you so much for sharing that story about your sister, and my condolences to you. But I do appreciate your transparency and just being honest through that because I think that means a lot, not just to me, but to a lot of people watching. People go
Yep.
through things, and it's never easy. Grief is never an easy thing, no matter who you are or where you are in life and all that stuff. But
No, it's
yeah, I appreciate you sharing, is what I'm getting at.
no,
So what do you
no
miss the
problem,
most
man.
about global living, being overseas? What do you miss the most?
What do I miss the most? I just like I said, I love like even when I go on a holiday, I love the immersion and like everything in my life. I've kind of started to sort of okay, I want to set myself up to where I can spend the time with family in places. Like I miss the immersion and stuff. I miss the experiences. You can get on a plane, go on a holiday. You don't get the experiences you get when you're on a 2 week timeline. You got to get back to work, get back to thing, get back to your job, get back to the normal day-to-day living back at home, as we call it. So, I think what I miss most is just the complete immersion that you get and having like a different sense of the world. Like the more time you spend somewhere, the more your perspectives are changed for life. And that's quite simple. You don't get that on a holiday. You get a little bit and a lot of people take a holiday for culture, but they don't have a cultural holiday. Or you got to actually immerse to a degree to get that cultural level. And that's what I miss. Like it's every time I go, I try and do something with locals. Like mum and dad lived in Taiwan. I went out with their driver to spend a couple of days in his world and his life because when we lived in Taiwan, we didn't live in the communities like Wellington Heights and all that. We actually lived out in the Chinese community, away from all the expat community groups.
So do we.
So,
Yeah, so
mhm.
do we. Hey, I totally get that. We
So
lived we lived in actually Yamishan, then
yeah.
Damshui, then
Oh yeah,
Timbu finally. Yeah. So my
yeah,
parents even moved one more time after I left, and then they ended up in
yeah,
Singapore. So I totally get that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's to
Which
me that's exactly what I think. It's like you got to have that experience. It's
yeah,
not kind of preordained or anything like that. You got to have that experience from the locals' perspective to get the culture experience on it. Not the touristy stuff. Go watch a dance group or try this meal, or you actually to see the life of it through their eyes in that perspective. And you can't generally do that day to day on a holiday unless you know how to actively seek it.
yeah.
So
No, I totally agree with you. And the
so
funny thing is, I it sounds like you and I grew up very similarly. Even in our households, just the
hmm
experience. My parents were never like, you don't have to love everything, but you have to try it. Learn the
yep
culture, appreciate the
hmm
culture.
yep
At the time, I didn't quite get that because I thought, why? There's a McDonald's right there. We're with McDonald's. Why can't I
hmm
go get a like Big Mac, right?
hmm
and yet, then we go to Chinese weddings, and you'd get the Asian or the Chinese culture soups or whatever the
yep
meal was. But now, looking back, I take pride in that because I'm so glad my
mm,
parents did that. At the time, I didn't
yep
understand it. Maybe like you too, but I'm
Hmm.
so glad now, because now when I travel, probably like you, I'd rather hit the local places. I don't
Mm.
want to do the touristy thing. Like even when my wife and I went to our honeymoon in Italy, we purposely went to the mom and pop restaurants. We wanted to do
Yes.
the local stuff. We didn't want to be the touristy, all that stuff. And I think that a lot of people that grew up the way you and I did, that's pretty common, right?
Yeah.
Because we were exposed to so many things at such a young age. But realistically, yeah, I'd rather experience the localness, so to speak, or the mom and
Yep.
pop shops like we talked about.
Yep.
So
That being said, I still would gladly spend 2 weeks at Disney World at the moment just to
okay,
take the little girl there. But that's a different cultural experience, or that's still a cultural experience, just not the one we grew up with. So
yeah,
the
absolutely.
it's a
No, absolutely.
non-attached culture.
Yeah, but it's almost refreshing to hear you say that, because at the time I
Hmm.
just remember as a kid, I remember thinking like, "Come on, McDonald's is right there. Big Mac's a Big Mac, right?" So it's refreshing
See
to
that?
hear somebody else went through that same experience. But
Yeah, see, I had the same thing, but it was Mary's hamburger, not
oh,
McDonald's.
Mary's,
Yeah,
nothing wrong with Mary's. Yeah, those of you that are
yeah,
watching that probably have no idea what we're talking about. It was
yep.
a Chinese restaurant, owned restaurant, but they made American food, and it was fantastic. And their hamburgers were the best. So
Yeah,
yeah.
still I think they were still around in 2000 when I went back. I had a burger. It was either from there or somewhere trying to be there, but it was still a good burger.
It's when Tim and I went back in 2016, it was still there. There's a couple locations now, but they moved like a block away from. Oh, I guess you
Yep.
never saw the new campus. And again, people watching have no idea what we're talking about. But yeah, Mary's was still there. I heard
Yep.
Erin Mahan. You remember Erin Mahan, who's actually
Yep.
yeah, she's still in Asia.
Okay.
But she goes back pretty frequently. And so Debbie Shapiro, I'm sure I'm throwing out names to you that
Yep.
people watching don't know, but the people that are
Yeah, no, I
listening,
remember.
there. Debbie's back in Taipei now, and
Okay.
Erin goes there quite frequently. She's in Hong Kong, but they've confirmed that Mary's is still there. It's just at a different location now, so
Nice. I had
which is good to hear. Yeah, which is
have to
good.
add that to the bucket list when I take the wife and kids back to experience my because that's an integral part of our upbringing in
Yeah,
Taiwan.
absolutely.
Mary's hamburger.
Abs- yeah, totally.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny. Tim and I went there. We loved every minute of it. So
Yep.
I totally agree with you. Real quickly, you brought it up. Your family now, your own family. Do
Yep.
they? We've kind of touched on this. We picked at it, but do they quite understand exactly how you grew up? I mean, it's probably hard for them because your wife's born and raised in Australia. Your kids are
Yep.
Australian. Do they get how dad grew up?
I think my daughter's getting a pretty good idea because she turns five on the 10th of Feb, so not far off, but she's already got 5 or 6 stamps in the passport, so she's well and truly living the sort of life I grew up starting with. So she's actually she gets picked up by a nanny and look, as in grandparents, and she says, we're going to the airport today, nanny. I'm going to Bali or I'm going to Disney World." So she's at the age of 5 knows the concept of travel. So she sees all the different things, and when we've taken her to Bali, she's been exposed to the cultural stuff. Taken her out to see some of the stuff locals do, eat the local food and all that. So she's starting to get that sort of formative aspect of growing up. So she'll try. I mean, her favorite food is I don't know if you ever went there in Taiwan, but there's a Din Tai Fung restaurant that's opened up in Melbourne.
Yep.
So her favorite
There's one
food
in
is
Shanghai too, so I know
yep,
that place well. Yeah,
yep.
absolutely.
So her favorite food is Din Tai Fung. She loves it. She'll eat it by the truckload. So
So would I. She's
she's
got good
extracted
taste.
it.
Yeah,
She's
you can
a food
tell that she's
taster.
got good
So
taste.
oh yeah,
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, that's good stuff, and it's authentic too. That's the
yep.
best part of that. It's authentic. It's not.
No,
I don't know how Australia is, but here in the States, I mean, they say Chinese food, and it's really not. It's Americanized.
no,
It's. But
that's it.
wow, man, we've still got time. I'm not by any means cutting this short. We have gone on, and I could keep talking to
Yep.
you, brother. It's this is a
Yeah,
good thing.
that's
It's not a bad thing.
yep.
But
No,
I
it's
do
great.
want to transition quickly into your professional life now, because we're going to skip over some of the questions, just get right to it. But
Yep.
your professional life, having read your bio and posted your bio, you've kind of done a little bit of everything, which is similar to
Yeah,
me.
jack of all trades and sort of like tended to just pick up skills. So I think one of the things going back to one of the most inspiring one of the people I'm most related to as far as the concept of the upbringing. I read Steve Jobs' biography and a few elements of what he did. So when he got into uni, he said he went studied calligraphy. Just that's how fonts became part of our operating system, stuff like that. So little things he learned. So going through, I'll look back and like I said, I started a science degree, didn't finish it, but I got heavily interested in the biochemistry side. I just couldn't see myself mixing stuff up in the lab that I couldn't see to make a profession out of trying to work out what I was supposed to be seeing and using a computer to tell me if I was right or wrong. So I didn't have interest in pursuing that as a career, but I did pick up elements of knowledge and in particularly to do with nutrition, things like that. So fast forward from that, about 15 years ago, I had a home-based business that was involved in a few nutrition products. I had a supplement that was actually capable of boosting this particular molecule in the body. Called glutathione, just to simplify things. So it's an antioxidant the body makes, but they had a product that could boost with precursor elements to go through. Impossible to ingest, so I got a fascination with this because of what I remembered in science as to how much it's involved with in the body. So I took that, got quite passionate about that particular product line. As far as translating for those lessons or that knowledge through came back to make me aware of potential for this. And go back a couple of years now, our family got the chance to invest, started taking over some of the family investments, and we got the chance to invest in a new startup out of Salt Lake City that was managed to take this product that can't survive the stomach and needs to be made through precursors to the point where we can now get active and instant absorption. It's been shrunk down so small it literally passes through the cheeks. Um, so what happens from there is swish it around in your mouth for 30 seconds and you've got a full dose that your body is utilizing. And like I said, the amount of spaces in the body where this is utilized is, I keep running into new scenarios every day as to what it's capable of doing. TG and FDA stuff sort of stops me from saying too much, but so we invested in this technology. I've been in sort of getting the framework set up for the Australian launch and expansion of it. Back in America, we're starting to sort of gear up for a rapid global expansion to go through. But essentially, all my life of different learning, so the science degree, then coming back to the exposure with the network marketing to see the potential viability and the potential market for it. And now to a point where it's been designed in a way that it can be taken mainstream. So I'm actually really excited to be taking this product and sort of getting it out to Australia. So we've got a skincare product out at the moment, and we're moving into nutritional supplements very shortly. So, but
That's awesome.
long story short, we've taken something that was impossible to ingest, and we've removed the digestive system that you don't need to ingest it. It's just straight direct. More or less the equivalent of taking IV direct to your cells wherever you need it. So it's actually quite phenomenal the technology they've built into.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
You just went way over my head because I'm not a scientist by any means. But
Yeah.
I was gonna say if you have a link or anything like that, type it
Yeah.
into that comment section, and we'll make sure it gets
Let me,
goes live.
yeah. Let me. Where's the comment section? All right. It's not one to let me know. I have to try it in the private chat and have it cut and pasted.
Yeah, either way, I can do that too. If you do a private chat, I can put it on the comments as well. So while you're doing that, I want you to kind of think about this, just because we're running a little bit short on time. You mentioned in your bio that you're constantly learning and evolving, even if you didn't necessarily realize it at the time. You've definitely had a couple careers. What
Yep.
exactly, if you don't mind, explain how the opportunities that have been presented to you kind of ended up that way, or do you regret any opportunities that you didn't take? By
I
the way,
can't say. Yeah.
before you answer that, hold on one second. Before you answer that,
Yep.
the reason I'm bringing this up is because I really do appreciate your entrepreneurial
Yep.
skills and background and all that. That's something that takes a lot of, lack of better terms, balls to do. Let's just be honest with that. So, but I appreciate that and I respect that. So that's why I'm curious
Hmm.
about this question. So yeah, if you don't mind
Yep.
talking about that, you talked, like I said, you talked about learning and evolving. Sometimes you
Yep.
didn't realize it till later. And
It's
then
yeah.
go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, so essentially, like, I think it all stems back down to the root sign at the TCK side of things, where you kind of you're not scared of anything because it's everything's temporary. So pain's temporary, failure's temporary if you're willing to learn from it. So I think a lot of what I was getting to there is a lot of the stuff. I've tried a lot of things. I've taken elements of skills that I didn't have and that I can take and apply forward later in life. Everything I've done, I've learned something. Do I have any regrets about some things? I'd probably say there's elements where I've had regrets where I didn't trust my gut at the time. I had a gut feeling, but at the same time, is until you've got that awareness of why that gut feeling, you'll always, like I say, we've got that polar. We feel comfortable, we feel uncomfortable in discomfort at times. So if a gut instinct's coming from periods of discomfort, we sort of tend to, okay, I'm comfortable here, that's all right. So it's not detrimental to the outcome in the end. So I think if I was going to ever have any regrets, it would be because I didn't learn from what I was doing. If I liked it or didn't like it, that's not so much the issue. It's what did I learn from it, and is what I learned applicable. So in the case of gut instinct now, where I've had in the past with different businesses, timings to sort of move into new fields or to get out, is I've had a gut feeling I haven't backed it. I'll sort of go back and look to why didn't I back it, or why wasn't I so aware of it to make a decision on it at that particular point in time. And you sort of come back then to, okay, there's that resilience again we got as the TCKs, where we're comfortable with discomfort, where we feel stable in instability. So you kind of you're in like a might be the rockiest spot on the ocean, but you're sailing. That's what you're thinking about. You're not thinking about what's rocking. You're sailing. You're in control of the direction the boat's going. But at the same time, is someone else might have control of the GPS coordinates or the currents that are taking you offline. So it's a question of, okay, you're used to being on the boat, you're used to steering the boat, but it's you want to get on a different boat. How do you do that? Why do you do that? And why do you want to? Because this is comfortable. So you get that area where you just blur the lines of where comfort and discomfort are, and sometimes it takes a little while to navigate that and actually get to the truth of what your gut's telling you, what your instincts are telling you. Because again, we can't take the traditional experiences that we get taught out there because we've got so many different perspectives that even we have trouble understanding amongst ourselves, talking to ourselves, let alone people that haven't had the upbringing and the lifestyle we've had grown accustomed to. So I think that's what makes it difficult to learn, is just that notion.
Oh, totally. I can't agree more.
Yeah,
I've been guilty of that too. I mean, guilty in a good way is
yeah,
taking chances and
yeah.
try it. What's the worst that can
Hmm.
happen, right? And
That's
then I
it.
think that a lot of our background has been, part of our DNA. We grew up in such a different way. We didn't know any better. We
Yeah.
didn't know any better other
No,
than to take chances, right?
that was
So
that was normal for us. Like
yeah,
someone else's
still is.
normal is completely abnormal to the way we look at it, and we need
Yeah,
to
and it
completely.
still is.
Yep.
And there's
That's
nothing
it.
wrong with playing it safe. There's nothing wrong with understanding normality, so to speak, quote unquote. But yeah, I do agree with you 100%. In the way we grew up, I think part of our DNA is to take chances just because of how we were exposed to so many different things growing up, right? It's just
Yeah.
nothing is normal to us. And I think that's a blessing and a curse. So yeah.
Abnormal is normal. Normal is abnormal. It's bizarre.
Yeah. And we can't quite
That's
explain
it.
it. You and I
No.
completely get it. I get
Yep.
exactly what you're saying. And yet people
Hmm.
watching this may be like scratching their heads going, no, why would you do that? No,
Yep.
I'm exactly like you, man. I've been burned. I've tried things, been burned. I've tried things and been
Yep.
successful, and
Hmm.
taking chances when nobody else understood what the hell I was doing. And yet you just, that's part of living.
Yeah.
But I totally understand that. I appreciate that. So, look, buddy, we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure I get these last three questions in. These are always the fun
Yep.
ones. The hard part's over. You can
All
breathe a
right.
little bit now. So, you're off the old light shining above you, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but I just want okay. These are always the three that I end with, and they're always supposed to be meant as a fun thing. You can turn the brain off now and just relax.
Yep.
But what is something most people don't know about you? Is there something out there that maybe even I don't know, or people that know you pretty well maybe don't not know?
Well, probably the most obvious one was I was as well as all the other facts of the childhood, I was adopted as well. So
Oh,
that
I
was
didn't know that.
but no,
Okay.
not many people do it. It kind of it comes out like so blasé in conversation sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. But it's just the way I came into the world, adopted, and like thankful for it every day because like look at the childhood we got to experience in Taiwan, which would not have happened if that hadn't happened. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's
Yeah, I
one
didn't
thing
know that.
most people wouldn't know.
Yeah. Was your sister as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Wow. Interesting.
both
Very
from
cool.
both from two different families. So
Very cool. Yeah, yeah.
yep.
Absolutely. What if you could sit down on a bench, a park bench, and just kind of look out, stare out into the ocean. You're in Melbourne and whatnot, but
Hmm.
and just have a good chat for an hour long chat with anybody, whether they're still with us or not. Who would that chat be? With, I
That's
should
like
say.
there's two answers. So my business brain and my entrepreneurial brain says Richard Branson,
Yeah.
hand
Okay.
out. My emotional side says Amanda, my sister.
Yeah.
Just to have one last hour of conversation with her, just to get some stuff off, get the things that I never got the chance to say, and just have an hour to listen to things that she wanted to say, get off her chest, or just tell me. That would be the other person. So like Richard Branson for the business, as far as personal, emotional, my sister.
I love it. They're great answers. There's no right or wrong here, and those are both perfect answers. So you and I both are travel guys. We love our passports. We love to be able to get on a plane and go anywhere. We already talked about that. COVID's kind of
Yep.
hit a big time pause button. But is there somewhere that you'd still like to get to that you've never been?
Somewhere that I've never been. Let's see. Would love to see love to see Egypt. Still haven't done Egypt. Just
Okay.
something drawn about that place. But on the same trip, I'd have to say Marrakesh, Morocco. Just something draws me to that place and draws my wife there. So
Yeah,
that's definitely a bucket list item on both fronts.
I love it. I love it. Listen, buddy, we've made it to the end here. I can't thank you enough for doing this and the transparency. I mentioned this earlier, the transparency and
Yep.
the honesty and just
Yep.
telling your story. That's what this show's about. I just wanted to
That's
give people a chance to tell their story. So thank you so much for doing this.
no problem. Pleasure, Ben.
Yeah.
It's been a minute and it's been great.
Yeah, it's funny how quickly this hour goes by, but
I
I
know. Tell me
just
about it.
yeah, I respect the hell out of humanity, and we have, like I said, you live on a whole different part of the world, and yet you and I have so much in common, right? We're so different, and yet we have so much in common, and we've experienced so many of the same things, and yet totally different experiences as well. So, but
It's I like to have the same conversation with other people all the way
yeah,
through. We've grown up separate, but we've still got the same roots and foundations that sort of defined who we are today. So it's bizarre. It's
and they'll
amazing.
keep defining us. That's the
Yep.
beauty of this. Is I think now that especially the fact that you come to Utah every now and then, we'll
Yep.
definitely keep in touch. And but yeah, man, it's been great to get back in touch with you and hear your story and what you've been up to. But seriously, thanks for doing this. I truly appreciate it.
Yep. No problem. Thanks for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna go ahead and log off. But like I told you earlier, don't go anywhere because you and I. Oh look, Justine Jesu, remember her?
I remember her very well.
She just popped in.
Yep. Hi,
Okay, I don't
Justine.
know if
Good
you
to
saw
see you.
earlier. Sean McKean popped in too. There you go.
Yeah, and we've had a few conversations on Facebook as well. So
Yeah, he and I still touch base quite frequently.
yep.
He's a good dude, so he's always there. But look, thank you, man. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off on this. But those of you that are watching, make sure you subscribe, especially to the YouTube channel. Until next time, we will do this next week. I'll have another guest, and those of you that are watching or listening, wherever you may be, thank you so much. This has been fun. This has been fun. Thank you again, Warren, for doing this. Appreciate it. But stick around, you and I'll chat here in a minute. So,
All right.
all right, take care, everybody. Be safe. Be good.